Welcome to Making More, the podcast where high-performing business owners and visionary executives share how they're building more than just bottom lines. I'm your host, Billy Fischer, an engineering leader turned business and executive coach, and I'm guided by a personal mission to help leaders create clarity, build forward momentum, and make more of what matters most. Today, I'm joined by Robert Reed, a financial services leader with a career that's navigated crises all the way from Bear Stearns to modern-day anti-trafficking intelligence. As COO of the International Bank of Chicago and Director of Operations at Darkwatch, Robert leads with a rare blend of hands-on expertise, curiosity, and moral clarity. He's here to share lessons on leadership through crisis, ethical guardianship, and how multiplying others' potential is the true mark of a great leader. Robert, welcome to Making More.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You've got such just a deep and thorough background in the finance sector. I want, if you can, for the audience, just to kind of walk through some of the roles that you've had over the years.
Sure. So I'll take you back. While I was still in college, I was on the floor of the Chicago Stock Exchange. That was still when stocks were being traded in fractions instead of decimals. So you can see where the gray in the beard comes from. That was an interesting time of my life. Of course, the life on the floor is nothing like you've ever seen. That's the best way I can describe it. Survived through the fall of '08 at JPMorgan, where I was on the phone calls where Jamie Dimon talked about sitting in the room with the Fed, during open employee and investor calls. Uh, Personally walked through various lines of reporters and things when a financial institution went down for cooking their books, having to cancel the contracts that we had between them. The fall of Bear Stearns, obviously, at JPMorgan. I actually had to walk into Bear Stearns' office in Chicago and work with them to move their futures and options accounts over during that crisis. Lehman Brothers, all those sorts of things. I was at the Options Clearing Corporation right after they were designated as a systemically important financial market utility and had to build out their enterprise risk management portfolio and program. Then moved on to BMO, where I worked through written agreements or quasi consent orders, as some people refer to them as, with the FRB and the OCC. Globally, with every 3 and 4 letter regulatory agency acronym you can think of, ultimately ending up where I'm at now with the International Bank of Chicago as their COO and Director of Operations for Darkwatch.
Okay. And then that's the kind of the other piece. Then I love the way you described it on our intro call. I'll let you use that again if you want. But this operation that you've got going on with Darkwatch, it's related, but it's much different in a lot of ways.
Sure. So when you're thinking about operations and regulatory requirements on the bank side, you're doing a lot of transaction monitoring. You're getting to know your customer, things like that. And then ultimately, what you're doing is, if something does come up suspicious, you're filing, various types of reports, including SARs or suspicious activity reports. Darkwatch kind of sits on the other side. My daughter likes to refer to my bank job as my Bruce Wayne job, and of course my Darkwatch job is my Batman job, because the nuanced difference is we're actually looking for the data for the financial institutions and the we'll say the law enforcement and government to find these bad actors, find these illicit massage brothels, and shut them down. So where you sit on the bank side and you throw reports over, Darkwatch, we're finding these things to help financial institutions shut them down right at that moment in time.
I think it's just a wonderful thing to be doing. I don't know how you got into it, but again, I think it's from that experience in anti-money laundering, things like you say with the regulatory agents, that just you have to be kind of watching out for these trends, these signals that just notify you that, hey, something's not right here. This doesn't seem correct, or this doesn't seem good. And so I think it's just a wonderful way to almost give back to the community that has launched you to this career.
You try to do a little bit of both, right? And I've been fortunate enough in my career to come across some great opportunities. I don't think back in '03, '04, anybody sat there and said, I'm going to do anti-money laundering, counter finance terrorism work when I grew up, right? It kind of really came through the KYC requirements from the Patriot Act and really having to know your customer. Back then, there were no systems, right? We were building this out on Excel spreadsheets, getting to know our clients and understanding what they were doing and why they were doing it. Again, I kind of fell into it because I was in the onboarding team, or I was on the onboarding team for futures options and FX at the time at JPMorgan. So AML compliance came to be, and we started building out those requirements. I received significant exposure to the regulatory bodies at that point at JPM, and that just continued to grow out through my career. About 5 years ago or so, I became president of an anti-human trafficking organization called Traffic Free here in Chicago. There was an intake location, but it was shut down during COVID because, of course, nobody was going to, traffic humans during COVID. It was illegal to be outside, so that wasn't going to happen. But now we do a lot of education in various sectors, industries, showing the signs, what to look for when interacting with people, so on and so forth. So again, it's just a very different connected world than what I'm used to from the banking side.
Yeah, but again, I'm sure it opened up a whole new idea of like, what does your professional network look like, and who are you serving now in this role? Completely different clients than the banking clients.
Oh, 100%. I mean, when you think about the regulatory environment in financial services, it's well saturated with things. But what Dark Watch likes to do is it likes to, be a disruptor in other industries. So hospitality industry is a sector that we're working with significantly, so that people, staying at hotels have a little more comfort that they're not staying with bad actors or any other, individuals that may not be wanted in that type close environment with kids or anything along those lines. So, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work left to do. But the more we do it, the more we're finding out ways to make it faster and better for those industries to help protect people.
Mhm. Think of yourself as a leader in these two unique roles. And I'm curious if you have to adapt your leadership style, one versus the other, based on the industry that you're actually in.
You do, because the banking environment is heavily regulated. Everything we do at the bank is regulated. So uh, when you're managing a team or when you're trying to create new leaders, the focus has to be on governance and controls and what to do in situations and how things have to be managed. When you're talking about more about dark watch and innovation, now you're looking to pull the creativity out of people. And I don't want to say that there's no creativity in banking, because of course there is, on how to manage things and find efficiencies and processes, but it's much more structured as to what you can do and how you can do it. When you're talking about combating human trafficking from a startup or a technology company, we're looking for new and innovative ways to scrape the open and dark web, and then enhance the data that we have to find the bad actors and what they do. So it's two different worlds where you have to manage people differently. The consistent or consistent in this leadership role, regardless of what we're talking about, is really about giving people enough space and time to develop so that you get the best out of them.
Hmm.
Deadlines are real. I'm not going to pretend they're not. We can't sit there and wait forever. But if you keep yourself on a tight leash as far as managing your time, there's always enough time to help, nurture more leadership and in and out of other people. Because ultimately, what I want to be able to do as a leader is I want to be able to go on vacation and not have to take 47 phone calls because something went wrong, right? I mean, you want that place, regardless of the type of organization it is, to run without you. That's the point. So that's the consistency in leadership, that no matter where you're at and what I'm doing, I'm always trying to make my people the best I can around me.
Love that. Oh, so good. It's about and love that you mentioned making other leaders, creating other leaders, besides just managing a team or setting the strategy, setting the goals. A large part of what leadership is about raising up the next generation of leaders and making sure that people have the space to grow into their own shapes and forms as they become new leaders.
100%. I mean, you need to be able to lead, and you need to be able to move things forward when you have to. But ultimately, again, the goal should be to make things better all the way around. And If you're not doing that for your team and understanding their thoughts and understanding their challenges and understanding where they think their career needs to go, you're not going to get the best out of them. That's all there is to it. And then how do they develop into the next generation of leaders if never given the opportunity? It kind of goes back to that whole thing, maybe about 20 years ago, where every job wanted experience, but if you couldn't get a job, you couldn't get any experience. It's that chicken or the egg kind of cycle. And the reality of it is yeah, you've got to be given a chance to get the experience, but even given the chance, you've got to be given the room and opportunity to grow. And that's the key to me to keep my team going and keep things going, is that I want to give them the opportunity to grow. And not everybody wants to, and that's okay too. Right? I mean, there is the aspect of some people like to go to work, they want to put in their 8 hours, and they want to do that every day, and they're fine, they're happy, and that needs to be okay too. It shouldn't be a push. It should be a collaborative walk along. And that's the other thing that I like to try and make sure I'm doing is I'm not pushing somebody somewhere where they don't want to go, but I'm walking with them to get to where they want to go.
Hmm. And that walking with them piece, that's a big part of what we talked about on our intro call. And I love the way you described it. It's kind of the leader that does, the doer boss, having a hands-on approach to how you're going to lead the team.
100%. That was actually given to me by somebody else at JPMorgan, and I'll keep their name private just in case. But they actually said that to me one time, that I was a doer boss, and I had no idea what they meant by that. And they explained, well, you actually can do the job we do, and you do it, and you help us, and you make sure you're there with us to see us through the long nights and everything else. You don't just delegate and run. And I'd say, to her, of course, look, we're a team. We got to get this done together. It's not about, who gets to go home first or anything else. And she said, yeah, but not every boss is like that. And I guess I've always just kind of been built that way, or built that way. So to me, it's always been about, understanding what your team does so that you can help make it better. If you don't understand what they do, you really can't make it better. Now, am I going to say that I'm an expert in everything my team does? No, but I at least need to understand it enough and sit with them enough to understand what's going on to help make it better. And I've done that. I recently, we had a new automation piece go in, and long story short, they were complaining about the time frame it was taking for things to cycle through. So I literally sat there with a stopwatch on the phone and was timing all these things and processes so that we could go to the vendor and say, look, this is unacceptable. We can't handle the volume and the time frame based on your change you made. So we enacted real change based on it. We got new functionality, and we were able to continue on. And although everything can always be better, they gained back probably an hour and a half to 2 hours a day of their job. And that was a huge deal, so they could focus on other things.
Mhm. Is it a fairly large team that you're overseeing at the bank? I would think.
So I roughly manage about 55
Okay.
percent of the people. So we're a smaller bank. We're about 120 people. I manage three of the larger teams that are there, but not the largest team. So a lot going on from the standpoint of BSA AML, the wire room, as we call it, or bookkeeping, and then also when it comes to some of the other sections of what we call e-commerce, or our electronic processing system team.
Mhm. And so with the team that's still pretty decent size, what's the line that you draw between knowing when to delegate and knowing when to kind of stay a little bit more involved so that you can kind of see something through?
So usually the projects, I want to make sure I see them through, right?
Okay.
You want to make sure that whatever change is being implemented is being done so for sustainability and efficiency. Otherwise, what's the point of the change? You've really got to make sure that whatever you're working on is going to have, a long-term goal effect of making things better. Now, that doesn't mean it gets better right away. Sometimes some of these projects are 2 or 3 phases, and the first phase is terrible, and the second phase makes it better, and the third phase, finalizes it. But see those through. The day-to-day operations and the minutiae is where I tend to stay out of it a little bit more, unless there's a challenge. I don't want to get caught up in the weeds, knowing full well that my team can handle that. Where they need the help and usually the guidance, and again, I'm saying usually because it's not always, is kind of on these bigger chunks that we're trying to accomplish in efficiency, and making sure that whatever system we're implementing or process or automation is ultimately going to have the best, the best of the bank's goals in mind. So it's not just about spending money to make things better. It's about, does this make sense, right? When you're looking at the risk profile of the organization, does this meet our regulatory obligations and make things better and make things more efficient or not? And when you think about Dark Watch, from the other side, which is a little less regulated overall, as far as the type of setup and things you do, you know, are the institutions that are purchasing the data that we provide or the technology that we provide, is it making their situation better? Is it making them more efficient? If not, is it creating more work for them that they don't need to do? If it is there an ethical reason to do that? Is there a good reason to do that? You've got to kind of keep walking through all these steps all the time to make sure you understand what's happening. And then ultimately you end up with the right results because you've taken the time to do that. So it's the projects I tend to stay in sync with, and less the minutia.
Mhm. And sure, maybe less regulated at Dark Watch, but I would say it's probably maybe even a little higher stake environment than the banking world, just because at the end of the day, there are a lot of their lives at the risk. So, how do you balance that with your leadership at Dark Watch, where maybe it requires a little bit more urgency?
Sure. So, I think balancing the leadership at Dark Watch is more about making sure that we all retain and maintain what the goal of the mission is, right? Yes, we're a for-profit company. Yes, they're looking to provide services and other things to individuals, but ultimately the goal, since we started out as a zero trafficking or a 501c, was to help end, human trafficking in general. So the products and services that we provide are really centered around eliminating that through the various systems, mostly through payment, and financial systems. Because if you cut the flow of funds, you at least slow it down a lot, right? You're never gonna end it all. It's a great goal to have, but you talk about boiling the ocean.
Mm.
I think it was 2015, and don't quote me on that. They were estimating in 2015 it was like $25 billion industry in sex trafficking alone, just sex
Wow.
trafficking. Now, when you talk about labor trafficking, war trafficking, slave labor, so on and so forth, who knows how many hundreds of billions of is in this. So at least cutting the system off in the financial services area through payments or hotel processing payments, or wherever that is, that does at least put a big chunk into what can be done and how it can be done.
Mm. That is a lot. Like, I don't think the majority of listeners really understand how big that really is. And I don't know. And since 2015, you think has it grown or has it shrunk?
No, it's definitely grown. I just don't have the figures in front of me. Um, Legislation has definitely tried to slow it down, but legislation without consequences really doesn't deter like it should.
Mm.
And again, you can put any law in the books, but if you don't follow it through with the consequences, the answers are irrelevant as to what the repercussions were supposed to be. So again, organizations and businesses are finding new ways to cut it off, through their own systems, because it's really the only way it's going to get done.
Mm-mm. It's gonna be a tough segue for me, but I'm gonna try to get to the idea of process improvement with you and understanding whether it's with the banking industry or with Dark Watch, finding weaknesses in process, finding just the areas of waste or the areas where there is lack of efficiency. How do you help with that? And then what's been some of the big wins that you've found over your career?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to find them is to literally draw it out. When you have to put the pen to paper and actually talk about the process. And I don't want to go down the path of a procedure. I think we all went through that exercise when we were kids of okay, write an instruction on how to make ice. And the first thing is like, well, put water in the ice tray, and you're like, well, where'd you get the ice tray? Like you keep going down these paths, but when you start talking about the leaders in the room, or start talking with the leaders in the room about how they do something, the easiest place to usually find the efficiencies or the weak points is where they can't even agree on how it's being done. And that's usually the quickest wins. So if you've got two or three leaders in the room and they don't even agree completely on how it's being done, that's usually the places to hone in first. I think the second best way to approach this when you're mapping it out is the easy question of why. Why are you doing that? And then you find out, half the time, that you were originally turning a report over to somebody because they needed it for X, Y, and Z, but that had been automated a year ago, and they haven't needed that report since, and they just delete your email every time you send it. So
Oh no.
it's a why. Why are you doing this? Like, what do they use it for? Are they getting the information they need? Do they have to do anything to the information? So it's just constantly digging deeper and asking the questions. Being curious was the old Ted Lasso, saying, right? Be curious, not judgmental. I like to say inquisitive. I just like the word better. I like to say it. But from that standpoint, being inquisitive and continually asking why is usually the best route to go. Once you find the sticking points or the funnels or whatever you want to call them, it's then looking at the capabilities of the organization. Do they have technology that can help? Is it a training issue? It's getting to the root cause and then finding the efficiencies. I think the biggest win that I've always had is looking at the technology and what we're already paying for and what you know we just aren't utilizing. And if we were to
Mm,
just start utilizing, would enhance the processes and make everything better. So I'd say that's a good place to usually start, is that you have these software programs that you pay for, and you've got whatever licenses or seats, and what are the capabilities that are in it. You may have bought it for X, but it has Y and Z in it, and you're just not using Y and Z because you didn't plan on using Y and Z, but now Y and Z can help you. So it's understanding what's in your toolbox, understanding your people's strengths and weaknesses, and then utilizing them at the right time. We just did this recently at the bank. Um, Hired some individuals. Turns out that they had extensive experience in Python and testing and tuning, transaction monitoring systems. We were going to pay a third party to come and do that. And then we're going to pay another third party to validate what the first third party did. And now we got to do the first part ourselves, which made it much better, because we knew the risk profile of the financial institution better than anybody else. And now we just have somebody come in behind and validate it. Are we going to be 100% right? No, of course not. We're going to, they're going to find things. We want them to find things to make us stronger. But ultimately, that's the best way to go about it in my mind, but also the best way to resolve some of those issues.
mm, so good. And I think your part about being inquisitive, being curious, asking questions. That's always what I tried to do as a leader, was just be there to ask the questions that no one else has thought of, and just try and make sure that the individuals on my teams always understood their why. And just connecting that to the overall mission and vision. And I think if we can do that much, then there's going to be a greater chance of success.
Agreed. I think you watch their body language while they're talking about something, and you watch everybody else's body language while somebody else is talking, and you'll see, maybe an eye roll, or you hear somebody kind of, chuckle a little bit, or and again, it's at that point, there's something that might be there for you to dig into. So just being conscious of everything going on around you while you're working on those maps, it just makes a big difference in the world.
Mm-mm. There's an anecdote that you kind of touched on during our intro call. I want to revisit it now with the audience. It's kind of a case study, if you will, for a lot of what we talked about with process improvement. It happened during, I think, the wire transaction project.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about when we were talking about switching over our OFAC scanning tools.
Yes.
And yeah, we just had constant challenges with the tool, and it was getting to the point where it was starting to cause significant amount of overtime. And at some point, you've got to look at that and say, is the overtime justified, or are you better off getting a system that may cost more to get rid of the overtime and create better efficiency? And I think the biggest thing about that is, again, it's understanding your process. Whenever I talk about these things with other groups, hiring individuals, or talking about technology, a lot of people just want to look for the bells and whistles, because they think that might be the best route to go. And the way I always try to talk about these projects with technology is to talk about, what is your risk profile? What are you trying to solve for? Because if you, again, you don't understand that, the technology can't necessarily help you with that. You're looking at it from a different lens altogether. So starting off with that risk profile and understanding what's happening to you and your organization and how it might need to process those things, I think is the best way to go. I've also been a part of other technology selection, committees, and I remember one fairly well, and it was a massive project. We had been given guidelines, and we had been given clear instructions that we didn't want to be the first adopter, and we didn't want this, that, and the other thing. But the reality of the situation was one of the software firms or one of the software pieces of software we were looking at was already in house. And regardless of kind of what we found out about the other pieces of software we were looking at, really the firm wanted us to go with the software in house, and that's fine, right? I mean, it is what it is. They're in charge. They can make those decisions. But ultimately, we had come across a piece of software that, out of the box, pretty much had all our processes and procedures built into it. We would need to tweak the manual side, our side, a little bit, but it was well worth it to never have to create kind of our own customization in the system, which just leads to massive amounts of back testing during upgrades and things like that. And so, again, you're trying to look at it holistically, and you're saying, hey, look, I know it's a new software, I know it's a new vendor, I know this, that, and the other thing, but ultimately, it's going to make this whole process years down the road better all the time. It's always going to be better than what we have to do. And with the software that was in house, we were basically going to have to create it. We were going to be the engineers in essence, and they were going to build it for us. But I did end up leaving there before the project was done. But ultimately, the better way in my mind to still go about it is, if you've got something out of the box that works, it's usually better in the long run. Customization causes so many more problems down the road.
Yep, I've had that exact same experience in industry with like large PLMs and even CAD systems, right? We at Toyota had customized it so much that we would take it to any of the kind of the big players in modern day digital transformation, whether it's Dassault Systems or Siemens or PTC, and they would all say, "You're not doing this right. We need to do this out of the box. Use our solution. It's perfect." And we would never be willing to say that we were going to change our processes internally because they were so built into the true standards of Toyota that we had to just make it work with these old pieces of software that were missing out on a lot of the new technology that was available. So definitely a detriment to kind of progress. But when you're a Toyota, you can kind of make that the decision. And a lot of times the big companies will bend over backwards to make it work. But you're exactly right that when you bake in those customizations, it's going to get a lot more expensive. It's going to get a lot less upgradable, right? When something new comes along, it's not going to be something you can drop in because there's just too much there that's been kind of undermining the system.
100%. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. I try to at least start, no matter what system we pick up, with out of the box functionality as it is. Now, some of the things we use in the financial service industry have levers and thresholds and things that we can manipulate that do not cause any of those challenges. But I still go back to the fact that if you don't have the data out of the box, how can you really start to customize it? Because I don't care if we're talking about OFAC screening software or transaction monitoring screening software or some of the AI we're building at Darkwatch. If you don't know how it's reacting out of the box, you really can't anticipate it when you start, flipping those levers and changing things to understand how it's going to react ultimately. And at least in the banking side of the world, I mean, again, heavily regulated, you miss something. The fines are usually not a yes or no. The fines are how many, zeros are on the left side of the decimal point. That's usually the issue. So, uh, making sure that you're comfortable with who's executing what and when, that's a big deal. It's a big deal on the banking side.
I bet. A lot of accountability that goes in with that. Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
Robert,
some
how?
states.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say some states are now actually making it possible to imprison the BSA AML officers,
Wow.
if they're, you know, aware of the issues and not doing anything about it, right? I mean, it's negligence to some, to some degree. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to play one here. But ultimately, when you're thinking about the fact that in some states you can go to jail because you accidentally missed something, and a lot of times it's more about knowing and not doing anything about it. But I mean, that
Sure.
that changes the whole game, right? Of who's even willing to take on some of these roles and tasks and do these things and be named that officer. So yeah, 100%.
Mm. So when your jobs have involved combating human trafficking and overcoming financial crimes, how has that shaped your view of leadership beyond profit?
Well, again, this is a struggle for all financial institutions. I'd like to say in a perfect world, we're here to make everything better, right?
Mhm.
Like at the end of the day, you know, we want to make the financial system stronger and everything else. And I believe that to be true. I really do. I mean, yes, there's bad actors and everything, but for the most part, I believe that to be true. But I think what we forget is that to some degree, in any kind of capitalistic society, corporations aren't people, right? They don't exist to give you health care. They don't exist to make you feel good about yourself. They exist to make a profit. And that's how the game is set up. So remembering that and then applying it from a leadership standpoint to do good in the world, say with anti-human trafficking, is really about possibly just rephrasing the situation, right? So I'll give you a great example. I think everybody on the planet would agree that human trafficking is wrong, and if financial institutions can stop it to some degree, because we can't stop it all. Like I'm just going to be realistic, right? It's not possible to stop it all. We can't possibly know everybody and everything they're doing to that depth and level. It's just not realistic yet. Will AI get us there? We'll see, but as of right now, it's not. So, with that being said, though, there is still some risk and some, let's say, reputational issues that come if your banking system has been used for that type of activity. I mean, look at the fines on JPMorgan for the Epstein files. You can look
Mhm.
at Red Roof Inn and the fines they've received for human trafficking. Um, I would think at this point, not only just being a good human to stop human trafficking exists. I mean, there is that other ulterior motive of not being in the news and not being fined, right? Again, in a perfect world, you're just doing it because it's the right thing to do, right? Right. But realistically, we have 101 million things that we need to do as the right thing
Mm.
to do, and at some point in time, some of those things become more important than others, and you've got to give and take to do things, and bad guys find new ways, so you find new ways to combat it. So when you're talking about leadership, it's always, I think, first and foremost doing what's right about your team, doing what's
Mhm.
right for the institution, both from an ethical, reputational, financial standpoint, but then tying it to how you can do good in the world. I mean, all the companies that I've been aware of and been a part of have some form of give back and some form of, program to donate time and on the company's time, right? So BMO always had days of giving that we were a part of, and we would sometimes go do things like fill Red Cross bags for disaster instances. Um, Maybe we're helping somebody build a shed or build something to help make their lives more comfortable, ramps for the handicap accessible at homes, things like that. Um, but now you can point to kind of the risk, the reputational risk and the cost risk and everything else, and really solidify doing good by more than just a feel good stance and the right quote unquote thing to do.
It's so good when companies offer that to their associates, the idea that you can come to work and that day is going to be dedicated to serving the community, to giving back. And just the organization embraces that, creates that where that's kind of built into the culture, gives time, maybe even beyond that throughout the year where you can go and give back and support. And so I think again, that's where the good comes in. Where corporate greed is, it takes a back step for a change, and you see the good that can come from large corporations that have an impact.
100%. And when you're talking about, a global company like a BMO that does this across the globe, maybe not necessarily all the same day, but around the same time frame, right? I mean, you're talking about, thousands of people being out there doing something in the community for good. And that's all there is to it, right? Like there's nothing else around it. There's nothing crazy going on. It's just you're going and doing something right for people to make everybody's world a little bit better. Because ultimately, I don't care if we're talking about Dark Watch or we're talking about leadership in financial institutions. That's kind of the point, is to make the financial institution or the financial system safer and stronger and better for everybody, because that security is good for people too. People don't necessarily think about it that way, but as we make the financial security system stronger, possibly there's less identity theft. Possibly your debit card doesn't get compromised and then you're without money to pay your bills. I mean, I don't think people think about it in that way when they think about banks, because they just think banks have tons of money and they can do whatever they want, and they're massive profits, centers. And yeah, that's true for some of those megas, but my little bank isn't, we're not that big, right? We don't work in the billions in the B, right? So from that standpoint, being able to affect change and make that system stronger for everybody, including the smaller banks, is just a good feeling to be a part of.
Well, Robert, I want to give you the opportunity to give some advice to young leaders out there who want to lead both effectively and with ethical compasses in complex systems. What would you say to those new leaders?
I think the two things that I would say first and foremost, again, is go back to being inquisitive or be curious. Always understanding everything to the utmost of your ability is going to lend you paths and doorways that you wouldn't have otherwise. I think the other thing too is to make sure that you're staying true to yourself. The kind of whole fake it till you make it thing and everything else, to me, just it's not genuine, and it comes across as not genuine. People are going to know. We all know, right? It's not hard to see when that's occurring. So being genuine to yourself and making sure that ultimately, you can live and stand by what you're saying and doing every day, on top of understanding and what's going on in your departments and your teams and everything else, just you know uh, makes everything better for everybody. Again, it just, if I give my team more opportunity, they may teach me something. They give me more opportunity to free up to do other things I may want to do. I mean, it's a cyclical thing of giving everybody else, including yourself, the power to do more, because you're giving that authority or that ability to others to step up.
Mm, so good. Final question, the signature question. Robert, at this point in your life and career, making more blank is most important to you.
It's going to sound cheesy, but making more time with my family is
That's
going to
not
be.
cheesy at all. That's the
It
big one.
sounds kind of cliche. That's that's why I say it, right? I'm going to tell you that, the whole bit about, oh, it moves fast and everything else. I mean, my kids are in high school. We're looking at 2 years before one goes away to college. You don't get that time back. And I can name several nights where I missed things like Halloween or things like that because the career was, quote unquote, more important. As somebody who sits here at 47 years old, I 100% can tell you that although you have to do things sometimes saying no is way more important than just saying yes all the time.
Mm, saying no. It's a lot of times it's hard, right? And it's not what people want to hear. It's not what your bosses or the leaders at the organization might want to hear. But I think you're exactly right. When it's family, I think there are organizations out there that agree with you that family needs to come first. And so I hope more can find that. Again, I've got a young one at home. That was one of the big reasons that I left corporate world to become a business coach, was the fact that I wanted to set my own schedule. I wanted to be accountable to myself so that I could still provide for my wife and my child, and just not have to answer anymore to the corporate hierarchy, the red tape that they made so all too common. And so I think that's beautiful, Robert. Finding more time for your family.
It's ultimately what you're going to remember. I can guarantee you, as somebody who's shifted through his career in multiple sectors of the industry, you will not remember that project. You will remember missing Halloween. That's what you will remember.
Coming up, Halloween, just around the corner. All right. Robert, thank you so much for your time today. Where can our listeners kind of find out more about you or more about Darkwatch?
Sure. So darkwatch.io is our web address. My email is pretty easy. It's robert@darkwatch.io. It's actually pointing in the wrong corner.
There it is. There it is.
It's right above me. You can see the Darkwatch logo back there. Look, we have community at Darkwatch, we have data, and we have AI technology we're building. So there's a good chance we might be able to help you out with what you're looking into, or get you to a good place to get you what you need. So feel free to reach out for anything. I appreciate the time, and it was great talking with you and meeting with you today.
No, it was my pleasure, Robert. Great to have you. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Making More. If today's conversation sparked something in you, let's connect. You can find me on LinkedIn and Threads at Coach Fischer FPT, or by visiting billyfischer.focalpointcoaching.com to learn more about how I help leaders create clarity, build momentum, and make more of what matters. This recording is copyrighted by Engineered Consulting Incorporated. Until next time, take care.